Microsoft had their New Zealand names hijacked at the registrar. A little bit later, Comcast had their names hijacked at the registrar. Just recently, Twitter had their names hijacked at the registrar. This has turned out to be the most common way a domain name gets hacked if it's a corporate name. But this is what's awesome. All those companies can leave. They can say, you know what, this company I've been using, you suck. I'm going to give my money to Mark Monitor. I'm going to give my money to Ultra DNS. I'm going to give my money to somebody else unless you get your act together. You don't have that option in X509. If VeriSign screws up, okay, you can go ahead and get a certificate from Komodo, but VeriSign can screw up again and again and again. It's only in DNS that DNS can say, well, sorry, the registry no longer accepts any information about that name from you schmucks. It's only going to accept information from you guys over there. This is awesome. So, when I said you could not exclude a bad certificate authority, that's not entirely true. It is possible. This is the little fig leaf of possibility. It's the lie we tell ourselves to make us happy at night. It is possible to exclude untrusted certificate authorities. And what you do is you run your own private enterprise certificate authority. It's like your own private passports between you and your friends. It's very expensive. It's very difficult to maintain. And shockingly enough, it has fundamental issues every time you need to interoperate with someone at another certificate authority. Now, the United States government actually has made this crap work. They built what they call the Federal Bridge CA. It allows all the branches of the US military to authenticate to one another. The people who made this work deserve a medal. Okay, I'd like a system I don't deserve a medal if I get it to frickin' work. I'm just saying. So, what a lot of people thought, and this is late 90s cluelessness, they thought that interoperability with other enterprises was an edge case. It was a strange thing which usually you don't have to do. Every once in a while it'll be hard work, but you know, whatever. 99% of the time you're just authenticating to a resource in your own company. And not true. The reality is cross-organizational authentication is the rule and not the exception. First of all, every company has 83 million alliances with other companies, with vendors, with contractors, with customers. Remember those guys? Not to mention interactions with other groups. Anyone who thinks a large company is only one company has never actually worked at a large company. Yeah, like you hear like the smattering of laughter. Those are the guys who are like, oh God. So, there are many organizations within an individual company who need to be able to authenticate to one another. The problem with we'll just unify it all at the root is it requires these multiple hop, you over there in another organization do something, so you can do something, so you can do something, and it's slow and it's expensive and it always blows up in our faces. Passwords. Just freaking work. It's a string of text. I can't emphasize enough. Everything I just described, or some letters. Okay, screw it, there's a $sign. It's just some letters. And that's how we end up with 61% of compromises coming from just some letters. So, if that wasn't enough, we have an entirely separate problem. And this one is actually more embarrassing because this is something that X509 tried to address. In fact, most of the complexity of it is related to addressing this, but whoops, it doesn't actually do anything useful. So, delegation. Earlier I told you, the root, you don't have to deal with it every time you want to put something somewhere in DNS. The root delegates to VeriSign for COM. COM delegates to a horde of companies putting names inside of COM. It's the same with all of these things. And once you have these delegations, you just don't deal with layers above you. You don't really have that for certificates, if you notice. Every time you need a new certificate for your organization, you got to keep going back to VeriSign. You got to keep going back to Komodo. Oh, I got a new server. I got a www server. I got a mail server. I got a this server. I got a that server. Now, I bet you all thought that this was just because VeriSign wanted to make a lot of money. This is true. VeriSign wants to make a lot of money, but it happens to be the technology doesn't really let you do more. Well, first off, you don't really want to keep going back to VeriSign because it's expensive. You have to keep paying them. It's operationally inconvenient. You have to keep waiting for them to come back to you. You're telling a third party about your internal organization. And by the way, it integrates really poorly with devices. If I buy a router, I can't get the router pre-shipped with certificates that make it part of my company. I have to do some crazy dance where I get the company to bring in the device, set it up, and then the company goes to VeriSign to get a certificate, and then VeriSign talks to me, and I click the link, and then I give a certificate to the company who's setting up the device, and at this point, you end up with every device in the world has self-signed certs. That's where the story ends, and we all see it. This is why. Now, what you should be able to do is just get a certificate that says, hi, I've proved this guy is doxpera.com. He can sign a cert for www, he can sign a cert for mail, he can sign whatever he wants, and he doesn't have to come back to me all the time. This would scale beautifully. This is not something X509 lets you do. It should. X509 has the concept of intermediate certificates. That's when the root, VeriSign, says, I don't want to have to re-sign stuff all the time. So I'm going to give this chunk of the namespace to you. Here's star.doxpera.com. You can sign whatever you want as long as it ends in doxpera.com. And this is what name constraints are supposed to do. Name constraints being a component of X509 v3. It took them not one, but 2 revisions to realize this might be an important feature. It's not supported to any reasonable degree. It's an optional extension. So what this means is, if someone gives you an intermediate certificate for doxpera.com, the thing won't work. It's just not really going to work for you. You can also get a certificate for star.doxpera.com. And now you get to put the same key on all devices throughout your organization. Here's the technology that was supposed to make it so we don't have the same password everywhere, and now we're going to put the same key material everywhere? Are you joking? DNS doesn't have this problem. The root delegates to VeriSign, VeriSign delegates to my servers. I can put whatever I want in doxpera.com. I don't do anything with VeriSign. I don't do anything with the root. I talk to my box. It's great. Now, you can painfully delegate with X509. And here's what happens. A company spends some huge amount of money on their internal enterprise certificate authority because they drank the Kool-Aid. And this still happens today. Like, we knew this was broken in 2002. This is still best practices in 2009. It happens to be the best way to solve the problem right now, which is why we've got to do better. Now, I'm just watching clocks here. Okay. You can't do delegation securely without name constraints. So what do people do? They do it anyway. At least, we have some very cool, very elite attacks against X509 certificate authorities. We'll talk about them. But you know what else you can do? You can just walk up to a certificate authority and say, yeah, so I spent a lot of money on my CA, and it doesn't work with anyone outside of my company. Here's a pile of money, and I promise to be good. No, really, the heart of, you can just buy a root certificate effectively.